All right. Here we go. I'm doing the intro today, folks. Here I am with Steve and Chris, and I'm Jared. We are doing the Oscar project. We still calling it a project? Yeah.
Sure.
Here on Page Chewing, and we are up to 1953,
60,
63,
65, I believe.
60. No,
65?
I think it is
Something like that.
65. This was a 64 movie, but the
64.
Oscar
We're up to
was...
1964, right? So uh, today we will be talking about My Fair Lady. And this is with starring Audrey Hepburn, and
Yep.
I don't remember who the guys
Rex
were.
Harrison?
Rex Harrison. Yeah, there we go. And Audrey Hepburn was the obvious star of this one. Out of all those old English dudes. So thoughts?
Another long musical.
Oh, Jesus, there's no such thing as a short musical, is there? Like, it's
No,
like, what the
apparently
hell?
not.
I, I did not know this was 3 hours long. And I have seen this
Was
film a lot of
was
times.
yeah.
I have acted in a stage musical of this. I have been in the orchestra for a production of this. I have seen a play version of Pygmalion, which this is based on. I've seen this film God knows many times. Even one of my kids is named after Eliza Doolittle. So, like, this film is kind of in the DNA a little bit.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. I've never seen it before. I've heard about it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think it even has an intermission.
It does. It has an
Yeah,
intermission.
it's so long. um,
It is needed. Like, I have to say, when the
Yeah.
intermission hits in the middle of it, you're like, "Oh, thank God," because I'm just sort of imagining being at the cinema going, "What the hell? Give me an intermission. I need a glass of wine or something in this." Yeah,
Or something. Yeah.
or something. What do you think of it, Steve?
It was a musical. I did like the idea behind it. The whole having the proper dialect, and you'd fit into a certain crowd of people, and you would,
Yeah.
if you spoke a certain way, then you would really wouldn't stand out. They'd think you belong. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was pretty interesting because it's true. If
Yeah.
you can speak in certain ways, then you'll fit into pretty much anywhere if you speak the right way, whether it's in a proper vocabulary or in a, I mean, if you can speak the language, so to speak,
Yeah.
if you can speak a certain way, then you'll fit into a certain group of people and make them feel like you belong, even if you really don't. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
if you can get all posh and stuff. uh, the yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting in the way that these were, of course, highly trained actors who could pull off this this speech that they needed to do. But it makes me wonder what they do for, like, you said you see it in the plays, Chris, and stuff like that. Like, how do they pull it off in a play that may not have quite the production value that something like this would, you know?
Well, I mean, I think it's worth saying that actually this was based on obviously a play version of this. The musical was existing. I had to look up from '56, and Julie Andrews actually played the
Oh,
main
okay.
character for many
Yeah,
years
she's
in
good.
the
Yeah.
stage play, and it was thought that she was a shoe-in for this role, but she was never even considered for it. And of course, she did Mary Poppins the same year. So it sort of went head to head, and as it turned out, Audrey Hepburn didn't get the nomination for the actress, but Julie Andrews did for Mary Poppins.
Ah,
Um, so like to me, this definitely feels very stagey because that kind of exaggerated speech that obviously
yeah.
Audrey Hepburn's character has at the start is very stagey. It's very kind of like over exaggerated as it would be in a stage play and that kind of stuff. So you see the change in them and whatever else, because on a stage you don't have the scenery to look at, you don't have anything else. It's very much in the diction and the idea that there's a lot of like word jokes in this,
Mm.
both in the main screenplay and also in the songs that carries through from one to the other is I think it's very stagey. It's very stagey, and to be honest, the stage play Pygmalion, which it's based off without the music, it's nearly identical. Like in terms of script, they didn't change hardly anything. You know, in a lot of ways, it's pretty much the exact same thing, but without the bangers of songs.
Hepburn didn't sing, right? Is that? I think that's what I read, right?
So she trained extensively, as did Rex Harrison actually, to sing. And Hepburn thought she recorded them as was, but was overdubbed in post production. And Harrison tried to sing, but they just said he was terrible. So they said he basically had to speak his way through the thing, and you know, sexism or not, Hepburn apparently was not best pleased because she had put an awful lot of time and effort into training. There's only 2 songs I think that are actually her voice and recording in the final production. So,
wow, yeah, did not know that.
She's great in it, though.
To have the main actress that doesn't sing all the parts.
Yeah. She is great in it. Like, I wonder if that counted against her, because I think you sort of said at the start, Jared, the whole thing centers around her character and her, you know, following along with her and believing in her and all the rest of it. So I think it's interesting that she is, Audrey Hepburn's obviously this very, very beautiful woman from the time. But if this had been more modern, Hollywood loves when beautiful people make themselves ugly in films. They tend to reward it. Sure. Whereas back then, there was no reward for Audrey Hepburn being a flower girl.
Loverly.
Loverly.
Oh, no, she was called a draggle-tailed gutter snipe.
Yep, that's her, gutter snipe, indeed.
Interesting insult there.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, did she do this before or after Breakfast at Tiffany's?
That is a good question. Right? My feeling is, it's way after.
Yeah, because
3 years after.
Yeah, I thought, wow, she looks quite different in the beginning, you know, and they made her up so, and compared to like Breakfast at Tiffany's, where she's you know, she's gorgeous in that film too. But and of course that's the whole point, is that, you know, she gets made over as the film progresses and into the fair lady quote. But the film looks beautiful. Like just the cinematography is great. The lighting is like perfect throughout it. You know, you can see everything clearly, and it's just very aesthetically pleasing to the eye to look at it, and so everything about that part of it was great. It really it's really quite sexist. And I know that's half the point of it was at the time was probably for it to be so, but it was it almost threw me back a little bit. I wasn't expecting that high level of misogyny going on.
Yeah, it's sort of, for me, it's a really funny film because it has a point that it's trying to make, right? But it's like almost beats you over the head with a mallet with it. It is not like exquisitely, introduced or anything. It's like the most kind of bog standard kind of point that it's trying to make, and it does it kind of very ham-fistedly. I think it's really funny to compare it to Mary Poppins because the two of them have sort of similar-ish time periods, if that makes sense. Locations and that kind of stuff, whereas Mary Poppins is seen as smarter than everybody else, whereas Eliza Doolittle is obviously seen as tawdry at the start, or that, I mean, the point that it's trying to make is sort of like your standing in society is more to do with the person and the character rather than, you know, where you come from, that kind of stuff. But Mary Poppins is a very proper lady, you know, very, you know, in that, and those two films coming out the same year and being pit against each other, I think is really interesting as a thing to say, right, we'll like that one more than that one, because I think popular opinion just would have said, right, we're not getting it to either of them because that's a bag of worms we don't want to go near, especially with the amount of misogyny and stuff that is sort of written into the My Fair Lady movie.
Yeah, because the premise is she's they're turning her into a duchess, or somebody who can relate to high society,
Yeah.
um, because it's almost like because there's something wrong with her,
Yes.
rather than you know rather than she wants to have a better station in life. And it's by the end of it, it's almost like she returns, and she is not really, she just accepts what he did to her, and there's a little bit of anger at the time when she's ignored and stuff at the end there, but then she just returns, and he just gives his little joke, um, and their relationship isn't really resolved to a point where it he he grew quite fond of her as the film went on, and
Yeah.
he actually loves her in his own way, as opposed
in his own
to
way.
I
yeah
was going to say as
well
much as he can, because
as
he's a
opposed to the
narcissist.
beginning where she
Yeah.
was just a gutter snipe,
Yeah.
but um and he missed her when she left, but it's on the condition that he doesn't give up that superiority
That's right.
complex thing he's got going on. And so I'm kind of like, oh, okay, that's how it ended. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of glad it ended the way it did, because the fact that these two are a perfect match is absolutely ridiculous. Uh, in a lot of ways, and the fact that he is an incredible narcissist from the very first moment of the film.
Yeah.
He's very much into showing everybody that he's superior than everybody else, male and female, in the entire film. I mean, he even makes that point of says, the problem with me is not that I'm treating you any differently from anybody else. Like, he treats males and females and everybody exactly the same. But he's not exactly what you'd call a very nice person. Henry Higgins, as it was. I sort of, what strikes me now is that obviously this was 1964, but this film was remade in the 80s as Trading Places, with the two old men and a black man instead of a woman.
Oh,
Very
yeah,
much,
yeah,
very
yeah,
much so.
right.
So. It's funny how that kind of translates another 20 years or so further forward, and it's like Trading Place is the same reason I don't think it's aged particularly well in a lot of ways, but it has a lot of the same beats the way through it, even towards the end, that people like Eddie Murphy's character rather than the old man. It's like, yeah.
A lot of movies don't age very well. I didn't
No,
realize that was a remake,
no, I don't
or
think
like
it was. It's just
not a
it's very
remake,
much a
but
similar beats.
Yeah.
Just and I don't think I don't think I've read it anywhere that the two things are so similar, but it just struck me very clearly on watching My Fair Lady that this idea that we'll take this guy that is a nobody and we'll make him great because we're so great. This narcissistic kind of thing is pretty much the same,
Right.
the same setup.
Huh. Yeah.
It didn't win
Yeah.
the Oscar though, I'm pretty sure. Needed more songs.
Yeah. You're right about his prejudice. He has an extreme prejudice against the uneducated,
Yeah.
right off the bat. And he there's actually a song dissing women, that he sings, and then he has a song, against a song about sloth and sin, and then how the poor can't afford morals, and so it was very not just not just he's not just a misogynist, he's also a quite a snob,
Yes, he is very much so.
and he has he blames the poor for being poor rather than other circumstances or what have you. So it was just it didn't like veer away from that. It
No.
just said once they got away from this section of the poor and all that stuff, they moved into his house or whatever, and they just focused on their story about turning her into a refined person. And it was just very interesting, beautiful look at, like really nice to look at, uh, and really well done. Um, but it's the sport of it, I guess, is what kind of turns me off a little bit because it didn't seem to have any kind of resolution behind that aspect of it. You know?
It is sort of like an unresolved ending, if you know what I mean, or an open ending, so to speak. It's
Yeah,
almost like her story is still be written. You know what she's actually going to do once she gets comfortable with this
yeah.
newfound ability that she has to
I
speak
mean,
to people and mix in those
yeah.
circles.
I mean, I think there's a resolution to their relationship, so to
Yeah,
say, in that they recognize that they can get along and they can live with each other in a certain way. Um, and and I don't think he's romantic towards her in the least bit.
yeah,
Um, so it's more like a older brother type situation or
yeah.
something.
It's very much. You know.
I don't
He's
Well,
know.
grown
kind of.
accustomed
It
to her
seemed like it
face.
was romantic. He was had some interest in her, right? Towards the end.
I mean, yes and no. Like it is sort of ambiguous. Like there is no doubt, but also it's not exactly feelings of adoration and love. To me, it's not. It's more I mean, the very line of "I'm going to accustom to your face" means that he's get used to you having her around in a way that a female has never existed in his life. So the only females that have been in his life has been his mum and his housekeeper, so to speak, who are both great. Both who, from the very start, like her much better than like him. And they see the quality of her in some ways. So it's to me, he's interesting in that way because he's obviously facing the situation in the future where he is going to lose her probably in some way for longer. And then what does he do? He hasn't really. I don't think he's prescribed himself what role she will play in his life going forwards, other than he knows that he wants her and needs her around, kind of thing. Whether that's romantically or as a big brother kind of thing, like Jared described to,
Or a pet.
or a pet. It's pretty good, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Plus, she's also a reminder of his success. You know what I mean? As a narcissist, she is the very embodiment of his skills. When he brings her and shows her off his balls, it's like I did that. It makes him feel good about himself,
Hmm.
so it sort of fits in with his character.
His Frankenstein.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was hilarious how they're at the horse races, and even before she got involved and was cheering on the horse,
Come on,
even
Dover.
before that, when you're watching them watch the horse race, they're all so stiff and formal, and like nobody's like wishing for their horse to win or anything. They're just looking, and it's just like, oh, okay, it's over now, and then they go back to their little party. Just like, oh man, and it's that's kind of a damning look at the rich in that,
Yeah,
in that
it's a
manner.
satire.
In that, why would you want to join that society when they don't look like they're having fun at all? They're just doing what they're supposed to do and following following the rote of their culture, I guess. And so,
Yeah, they're preening and parading just like the horses. If you know what I mean, in their get up and their gear,
right.
and everybody's looking at each other and very finely brushed down and all the rest of it. There is very little distinction between the horse and the crowd at that stage. Yeah, that part feels very satirical about the upper classes and that kind of stuff. As are the names, by the way. I think George Bernard Shaw was very much into that. So you have Henry Higgins is a very ordinary name, but it's because he has the title Professor that he is elevated. Same with Colonel Pickering. Again, not to kind of go too far back, but again, this idea that people within the military or rise to the rank in military probably come from an upper class kind of upbringing, and like Colonel Pickering does. And then most of the other characters, anybody that's outside of that is then the double barrel, the classic English double barrel name of Freddie Eynsford Hill. You know, another way to denote upper class. But the idea that he has a very ordinary name, Henry Higgins, I think is another kind of point that he's making, because to me, it's alluded that he has never deserved the standing, if that makes sense, other than having the professorship and having the professor name of it. You know, if he was just Henry Higgins, he would be a nobody. But because he's Professor Henry Higgins, he gets to be Snooty McGoody.
That's good. That's good.
So, are you guys surprised that there's so many musicals that have won Best Picture? Is it surprising now because musicals aren't really a thing? There's a few, but
Yeah.
is it because
But
musicals aren't really a thing anymore, or is it unusual for musicals to be Best Picture so many years?
it's an interesting question for sure. Like, I think musicals now are very much looked at as lesser, you know, lowest common denominator kind of thing. But musicals at that time were where all the money went. You know, again,
Hmm.
we're in the period of time when musicals are what people paid to see. So the top two films of that year, by a long way, were Mary Poppins and My Fair that year. And even things like A Hard Day's Night, which isn't really a musical, but still in the top 10 by the Beatles. So these were what people were paying big money to see. But 65 is sort of the first year of the ones that we've done that we start to see pictures in the best movies that aren't pictures that people went to see. And they aren't the top 10. So previous years, it's always been like the top 5 or 6 best favorite movies that people went to see. This year kind of stood off it. So I think you are sort of getting a feeling that the Oscars are moving away from popularity contests. But because Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady have, as Jared alluded to, this incredible production design. They look incredible. They're lavish. They hit big stars, and everybody loved to go see them. They were celebrated in a way that everything's revered against us, because you would never see a superhero movie nominated for Best Picture Oscar. In fact, it might be controversial this year whether June 2, which is a magnificent achievement of filmmaking, gets a nomination. It probably will, but again, it's sort of genre fiction, you know, and they tend to rebel against that. Whereas back then, these were the biggest budgets, most money. You could see it on screen. It's something that wowed people at the stage. So, you know, we're still in the middle of that period. You would think it would only last for 2 or 3 years, but it lasted for 10, 15 years at the stage. Even further
Fair
going back.
enough. Yeah, it took a lot of push to get a win for Peter Jackson with Lord
Yeah,
of the Rings.
that's right. That's right.
Because I felt clearly that he should have won the first year he was the first film should have won that year, and maybe the other ones might have had a little more competition, and I think they gave it to Return of the King as an
Yeah,
oversight for the previous two, but it takes a lot of push in order. Like, I think there was a lot of blowback that these films weren't recognized because they were genre fiction and they were fantasy,
yeah.
and how can these be a best Oscar thing? And so you're right. A genre film nowadays doesn't have the chance, and I guess musicals could now be considered a genre film, um, or just a type of film that wouldn't have the cachet that some of the movies have nowadays, like a Scorsese film or something like that. But which is all too bad, I guess. The but musicals were in back then, during this time. They were definitely in. They were, and maybe it has something to do with the the cachet given to composing that doesn't quite exist today that it did back then. Um, so many films nowadays, they're using digital means to compose music and put it to the films or what have you, or just it's somebody in their basement making the score for the film or what, and especially those independent films, which can't afford, they can't afford the big name composer, big or actual orchestra orchestrating music, and so back then you had when you had a composer involved, like Shaw or the guy for West Side Story.
See,
Yeah, when you had somebody of those names, of that cachet, that was a bigger deal, and it was a bigger deal for your audience appeal as well.
that is such a great point, actually, Jared. You've got to think back that about 63, 64 was the birth of real popular music. Around that stage when the charts were being filled full of like new rock and roll songs, or Elvis, etc. There was some going through, but a lot of the big hits would have come from musicals and stage shows at that stage. Like
Right.
even on the street where you live from here, was a massive hit for Perry Como outside of this musical, by itself, around that time. So actually, the movies at that time were like a, a clash of this great visual spectacle, but also what would have been popular music at that time. So it would have carried a lot of popular weight. The musicals that did both across those multiple stages have been getting radio play, would have been getting films, people going to see. So it would have come across quite strongly in terms of popular culture impact.
Right. Well, that being said, that Church on Time song was way too long.
I'm getting married in the morning. Ding dong, the bells are gonna chime. I just think they needed to get the dad another song. It's a banger though. It's a banger. I don't care what you say.
I think in addition
Everybody
to,
loves that.
oh, sorry. No, I was thinking in addition to the composing, I think the star power helped
Yeah,
musicals too, because there's these huge movie stars that everyone knew and everyone wanted to see. So when they attach themselves to something like a musical, people are going to go see it. We don't
yeah,
really have that anymore. We don't really have movie stars anymore like that. Most of them are franchise, or you play a character. You're not huge. There are not very many box office draws anymore.
yeah,
Bigger than life type of actors or anything.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean the few musicals in the recent decades that have won um, have had that star power. That
yeah, yeah.
Catherine Zeta-Jones was in Chicago, and
That's right.
um, uh, Moulin Rouge had Nicole Kidman and what have you, and
Jim McGregor. Yeah,
so those are the ones. When the star power was associated with it, it gave it that extra push to get into the spotlight.
yeah. I think it's worth saying as well. There's kind of 2 points that kind of jump off. One is the fact that Rex Harrison was actually the part was offered to Cary Grant originally. That was who was supposed to originally do that part, and Cary Grant's originally from England, and he's from Bristol in England, and he thought that actually his real accent was very close to Eliza Doolittle's, as at the start of it was more close to that, so he felt sort of uncomfortable playing off that, if that makes sense, because that was his birthright and his where he kind of came from in a lot of ways. He felt that it was too close to home, and therefore he wasn't suitable at all to be playing that role. And Rex Harrison had played it in the stage thing. But the other thing, we've talked about this in previous discussions. If a film's going to win Best Picture the next year, it has to do something better than the previous year or the previous musical, if you know what I mean. And like, it had been a couple of years since West Side Story. I think West Side Story is a way superior film than this. Like, to me, they're like night and day. But I think the songs of My Fair Lady are really strong, and I think the production design of it and the star power is greater than West Side Story. Right in the way across, Audrey Hepburn was a big deal back then, and having her in play, she's a bigger deal than Judy Andrews at that time. And by the time we come to next year, the next film that was to win Best Actor, the best film had to do something better, and we'll talk about that next time we do the thing about whether it does or doesn't. But it has to move the thing on. But we're really coming to the end of this musical period right about now, and the nature of filmmaking, even the films that are being talked about and being made, are a very different feel to any of the films that are getting made about now, which is the musical, the historical epic. You know, that was pretty much all that was being made at this time for awards consideration. And it's only a couple of years away from, like, okay, this has changed quite significantly in terms of we're getting into what would be the glory period of the 70s, where films were doing something very differently from what they were doing now in terms of like looking after their audience and stuff.
Mm.
Tom Jones.
Tom Jones, as I said last time, very famously like the WTF of Oscar wins.
Oh yeah, yeah. But a couple of powerful scenes I thought in this
Yeah.
film was of course when they ignore her while they're congratulating each other and patting
Oh,
each other on the back and stuff like that, and they don't include her in the celebration of what they pulled off. Um, I thought that was a really powerful scene. I really like how they pulled that one off. And I really like the scene where she goes back home
mm.
and nobody recognizes her. She doesn't quite fit in anymore where she came from. And I really thought those were two really just great scenes, great storytelling at those points. Um, but when she kind of just comes crawling back to him in the end, it kind of made those powerful scenes a little less.
I agree. Your Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scene with the slippers where she blends into the background and all that kind of stuff, I think is magnificent, like, because she's there present throughout the entire scene, and even with the place her in the thing, she's literally standing in the corner of the room in the dark.
Yeah.
She's always there, and they don't even see her. They don't
Yeah.
even feel her presence, and he's talking to himself when he's asking about the slippers, and she gets to throw them at him and all the rest of it. And it's such a powerful visual storytelling scene, as much as it is like, you know, in terms of script and everything that she says to him at that stage. Um,
Yeah,
because
it really stood out to me. That was
yeah,
like that was just like the scene. That was like the movie right there. That really, I thought that was a great scene. Great,
yeah,
well pulled off.
yeah.
She was like a
And one of the things
lampshade.
that I think really makes it work is the fact that I don't think the audience have really seen her up until that point. You know, they've been kind of rooting for her to do well at the ball, to kind of pull it off and be the sport of it, as you quite rightly said, Jared. They're kind of involved in the sport of it. They haven't seen the actual emotional long term impact on her and actually what it does until that moment itself. It's just, I mean, it's sort of the reason that the scene works so well
Sure.
within that. My favorite scene in the whole thing is, I mean, her dad's brilliant the whole way through. I just love his character, but his conversation with her that Henry Higgins ruined him and made him middle class and ended up getting married. I mean, that scene is hilarious. Honestly, like, so funny. In so much as he's kind of like said, "Don't you fall for it? You rebel against him, and all that. He ruined me, but don't let him ruin you. Don't you be coming asking me for a penny? You don't need it. You're better than that." And I just his whole character is just it's brilliant. That scene makes me chuckle so much.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
It is long. This is long. It's a long.
Well, see, I mean, I was thinking about this, Steve, right? So I was thinking about why these films are so long, and this was a film as Pygmalion in 1938. I actually should look up to see how long Pygmalion is as the script because it's pretty much exactly the same script, right? As a thing, how long was that movie originally? Let's see, it's 1 hour and a half, like all films were in 1938. It was an hour and a half. So you take a film that's about 1.5 hours long, you stick in an intermission, you stick in a bit of window dress, and it's a 2 hour movie. You get an hour worth of songs. I think that's pretty much how it happens, and a lot of the songs are reasonably long.
Yeah. And
Um,
they did what we've seen in a few of these movies now. where they have this extremely long opening scene
Yes.
focused on one picture. In this case, was of flowers. They were beautiful flowers, but um, and it just went on and on and on and on. I'm like, are we gonna get to the first scene of dialogue here? Uh, and it- that was just that's a running thing that all these movies do. Even Tom Jones did it, and it's just,
It did.
and I'm just like, okay, I am looking forward to when we get past this this hang up of having a super long opening
Yeah.
photograph with just music going.
I wonder if there was reasons for that. Like people felt going out because a lot of these films would have been double features, so they would have had something before it, and then they probably played this straight afterwards. But probably that period was where people went out and got more refreshments, went to the toilet, and they had to extend it out, or people were arriving late. It is not like
Yeah,
the. I would assume that it's not like the theater now, where we have adverts, then
right.
we have the trailers, and then you have to hit the ground running. Your advertised start time is 8 o'clock. Film doesn't start 20, 25 past 8, as happens now. So I'd imagine because it's so prevalent, there must have been an
Yeah,
actual reason for it.
that actually sounds right. Yeah, yeah,
But it does make you kind of go, right, in modern terms, it's like I'll look at my phone for the first 15 minutes of this movie because actually we're just getting the credits still, and
Yeah.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. Now that I'm thinking about it, I remember going to the drive-through when I was a kid.
mm.
With sitting in the back of the car, and
What were you
they
doing in the
had
back of the car, Jared?
listening to the movie. Uh, and
You were I assume you drove and then got in the back seat of the car, like.
what I said when I was a kid, my parents
Oh,
take.
right, sorry.
Uh, so there was a double feature,
Yeah.
and you had that. You're right. You had that. You had all those everybody getting out of their cars and going to the bathroom and going to get popcorn for the second feature and what have you. And
Yeah.
so that yeah, I think you're spot on there. Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
But
So where
yeah,
does it rank?
out of let's see, let's see, West Side Story.
So that's the first thing. Is it better or worse than West Side Story for you?
I think it's worse.
Okay.
Yeah, I overall, yeah, I think it's worse. Yeah, I think West Side's the better story. I think it's the better. I think West Side had better songs. Um, I
Better
think,
West Side
story.
has proper choreography in it. Like it has the way
yeah,
people
it's better
walk and all that.
choreography,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think My Fair Lady looked a bit slicker
Yeah,
with the
for sure.
with the set direction and stuff. But I think West Side Story is overall a better film.
I think West Side Story is much. It's watching something like that now and looking back. I think you realize how influential it was and how many aspects of that movie that are used in other movies after that.
Oh, yeah.
Even something like Grease, like when we discussed it, Grease is massively influenced by West Side Story.
It still has a resonance. Even in what it's themed about, I think that translates much easily over time. I mean, this, like I said, sort of dates, not just in terms of its actual story, but actually how you use that story kind of going forward. Whereas, I mean, you could argue West Side Story is basically Romeo and Juliet, which was 1500s, so it stood the test of time that long. But that story will get told and reused again and again and again and again. This gets she's all that. It gets there's it's
Yeah,
used maybe as it doesn't quite hit the heights that Romeo and Juliet does.
yeah. No, I mean, I could definitely. You could probably find examples of a version of this of My Fair Lady, more modern examples.
Yeah.
Um, but hopefully they tackle the issues and themes with a little bit more subtlety and not hammering you over the head. And hopefully there's ramifications for the outdated societal viewpoints that this movie puts forth. Which, admittedly, when you're watching these characters, you still like them. You want to root for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not unlikable people, and so, I mean, yeah, the guy puts on airs and he throws down insults, and it's kind of a joke to him. But when he's doing the stuff to make her into this better person, you're kind of rooting for her to become that better person, so to speak, better,
especially with the modern lens. Definitely,
in the ways of his viewpoints of what he thinks is better, and so you're kind of rooting, and you're rooting for her to succeed because you like her, you want her to succeed, and but hopefully any more modern films would have a deeper meaning behind it. It's something that went that had I guess a deeper statement is what I'm looking for, where instead of, we did it and she's mad at us, okay, but she's back, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt. She's a very beautiful woman, Audrey Hepburn.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Every time we come and discuss these films, I'm reminded how great The Apartment is. Such a great...
Yeah, it's really
so
good. That's still my number one.
Yeah. I think I said this last time, but it'll be I could take sweeps in the first film that will beat it, if that makes sense. In terms of like, okay, this is a clear, like, The Apartment's a great film. It might never be beat, but I think there's some that are coming up that are like, okay, this film's the shit.
Yeah.
Oh god, I forgot. There's still a couple of musicals still to come. Oh, dear, I'm
There's
just
a few.
looking forward. There's a few, yeah.
Yeah.
That one's a travesty. Oh well. Oh dear. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anything else you guys can think of?
Yeah. Any last words? Yeah.
No, I mean, as much as I love My Fair Lady, I sort of love it for its entertainment value, not for its kind of what it means or what it stands the test of time or anything like that. It's very much a follow, a bit like you said, you sort of like all the characters to a certain point. It's like a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon kind of movie. Just have it on the background, pass a couple of hours with the family and with friends, but you're not it hasn't changed anybody's life. It hasn't done anything like that. And I think, compare this to the next conversation we're going to have, did that film change people's lives in a different way? Because, again, it's a musical. It's, it fits a lot of the same archetypes, but did it do something slightly different?
Cool. Looking forward to it. The next film is The Sound of Music, right?
The Sound of Music, starring Julie Andrews, indeed. Christopher Plummer.
Yep, for our
indeed.
Next thing, yeah.
Well, actually, one last thing I do want to mention, actually. So, best song at the Oscars that year, right? My Fair Lady won the Best Picture. Did not have a song from My Fair Lady in it.
No kidding.
I thought that was really odd. Now, I know it was a stage musical from '56, so therefore, there'd been hits, like Perry Como with hits with the Street Where You Live. So maybe the songs were played out by then. But Chim Chimery won the best song that year at the Oscar, which, again, banger. Can't really argue with that. But I think it's interesting that won Best Picture and didn't have a nomination for that.
Awesome. Wow.
There you go.
Thanks to you, Chris, I use the term banger a lot now.
I mean, you are very welcome. Banger. The term banger is best used for songs that aren't actual bangers in the classic sense of the thumping bass line and stuff. It's just, it's best when you're talking about Pretty Como's where in the street where you live, or I'm Getting Married in the Morning as a banger, because, I mean, when it comes on, the arms start swinging.
Oh.
Yeah. With that said, cool. So yeah, the Sound of Music will be next.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, Chris, where can people find you?
They can find me on this podcast for the past couple times, but they can also find me on patreon.com, on the podcast Speculative Speculations, or on my YouTube channel at Chris Mo.
Jared.
And you can find me here, and you can find me on Speculative Speculations as well, and you can find me at my YouTube channel, The Fantasy Thinker. Yeah, lots of places.
Cool. All right. Well, cool. So we'll see everyone next time for The Sound of Music. Until then, everyone have a great day, and we'll talk very soon.